that energy. I am really, really excited about this Innovation Summit. This is my second year leading the health track. And we have a great lineup. This lineup here is kicking us off this morning with the theme I think a lot of us really care about, thinking about so many things happening in health innovation, with AI, investment, entrepreneurs trying to navigate the space, but most importantly, thinking about how the innovations that are developed support more and more people, right? If the innovations that we develop continue to support the people that just have access, then we're not really doing what I think our mandate is supposed to be in this space. So this panel has been kind of curated in a very intentional way because these leaders are thinking about not just scale, but also impact. So with that, we're going to kick off, and I hope my voice holds, and we'll eventually get some mics in here. So I'm going to have each of the panelists just talk a little bit about themselves and what they do, and then we're going to dive into our conversation. So I want to start with my good friend Katie Drasser from Rock Health.
I was trying to sit way down here, far away from you, because I thought you were going to.
Yeah, you thought I was told to go to that side, but I don't follow rules.
Neither do I. That's why we're friends. It's really nice to be here with you all. I need to give a shout out to Yale for what they've been doing in the School of Public Health, Dean Reaney and KP for growing the entrepreneurship program, the lens, really putting public health on the map in a different way. It's so refreshing, and we should all be learning from it. So I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Katie Drasser. I'm the CEO of Rock Health. We play at the intersection of founders, investors, entrepreneurs, enterprise. We have a fund that supports startups. We have an advisory business that supports enterprise, and a nonprofit that allows us to go headfirst into our mission of making healthcare massively better. So I'm thrilled to be here, and over to you.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. My name is Moses Adubi. I am a principal at Deerfield Management. We are a $15 billion healthcare-only hedge fund. We invest across therapeutics, medical devices, and healthcare services. We invest in public and private securities, and I sit on the private healthcare services team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alina Zolotarova. You might be surprised that I'm not Dr. Brooks Leitner. He was originally supposed to be here. He's my co-founder, but I'm the co-founder and chief marketing officer of a company called VO Health, and we're developing next-gen diagnostics of human health span and performance. And Brooks is actually an alum of Yale. He did his MD, PhD here. So
his wife is having their baby as we speak.
Yes. Next generation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kobe Takeda, co-founder and CEO of ParaSuite. At ParaSuite, we're helping community health workers. Actually, who knows what a community health worker is? Curious. Okay, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's a emerging workforce that has been around for decades, but has only recently been getting recognized and valued in the healthcare system. So we're building infrastructure for them and helping them through both technology and a provider network. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Great, wonderful. So you see we've got a diverse group of innovators and folks that are investing in the space. So I want to start out with, do some of you know about Hallie Tecco? You heard that name?
Yes, sir.
Okay, she recently put out a piece I thought was quite interesting. It was basically arguing that, AI has eaten digital health, right? And what she was referring to is that Rock Health, in its most recent report, actually stopped separating out AI as a category within digital health because AI has become embedded in everything, right? And so I thought it was like an interesting theme to think about, and particularly how fast it's been happening, right? This dynamic. And so I want to hear from our panelists, do you agree with that statement? How do you guys see kind of how this plays out in the next couple years with regards to this dynamic with AI in our digital health space and all the changes that are happening? So I'll open the mic to whoever wants to start.
I can start, I guess. So if anyone's ever met a community health worker, there's this saying that trust is key, right? Trust is what they built their relationships on. They connect with people in the community, in churches, in homes, and in schools, and it's all about building that personal connection. That's how they are so effective. But community health workers for decades have been working on paper and spreadsheets. And so for them, jumping from nothing to something like AI is a big gap. We used to bring up AI in our marketing materials, and everyone would be scared. It actually wouldn't want to engage with us because of AI. They think AI is going to take their job. They think it's going to replace them. And so it's all about how do we balance the opportunity with AI with the basics of infrastructure and things that they really care about, which is billing, documentation, and being able to be incorporated in the healthcare system. There was a really interesting, we received funding last year from a combination of investors. But our SaaS investors are like, put AI like 20 times in your pitch deck, right? That's all they care about. Our impact investors are thinking more about how do we really empower and uplift the community health workers. And so it's a really different balance of tone. We have also a third of our investors are healthcare investors, and they care about health systems, health plans, and the revenue opportunities. So what's really interesting is that because we have a balance of investors, we don't have to really focus too much on AI. Obviously, it's a big part of our business model. It helps us grow. It helps us do our work better. It helps empower the community health workers. But we have to be really thoughtful about how we market it and incorporate it into our workforce. So yeah, it's something that we're thinking about constantly. We incorporate it quite a bit. But if you look at our platform, our website, you don't see it too often because I think the workforce, we're mindful that they're really sensitive to this word. And at the same time, we want to make sure we can focus on things that really reduces, tedious work for them, reduces administrative burden, increases efficiency, and increases outcomes. So, thanks.
We invested so proudly in Pear Suite. And part of why we invested is if you think of community health workers, you can think of them in a few ways, but they've been undervalued. They've certainly in the US, they've been underinvested in. And when I think about what Hallie, by the way, is the founder of Rock Health, so we're pretty aligned typically. So I do agree with what she said about AI eating digital health. I think when we think about then what's next and what's the differentiator, I do think it's companies like Pear Suite. But what's bigger than that, what connects that to other sort of broader ideas that we're excited about, it's what is the human optimized healthcare plays that are powered by AI rather than the AI powered healthcare plays? What optimizes for human connection, trust, that layer of infrastructure, that to me and to us is the differentiator. We have tons of invention, we have tons of innovation in healthcare, but from innovation to infrastructure, from innovation to implementation, we have been so terrible at as a healthcare community. And it's not niche. It's 1/5 of our economy. It's one of the largest, if not the largest employers in the US. So on this topic, this is a really big deal that has societal and economic shifts and transition points. And I think those shifts are not going to happen without leaders like Colby and others. Leaders and institutions have to do this shift intentionally. It does not just happen. And so if we want to invest in AI being infrastructure, well, how good do we want that infrastructure to be, and how human-centered and how trust-based, and how do we optimize for human connection, the parts of healthcare that won't go away? That's something we're paying attention to and where we see the differentiation and where I agree with your opening comments.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I think when you sort of think about the term like tech-enabled, about a decade or so ago, and it became this novel term, and then every company you saw was now like a tech-enabled company. It feels as if we're also in, a similar zeitgeist where like every company now is an AI-enabled company. And I think what's interesting about what the two of you just said is, in highlighting the differentiation of companies, it really wasn't a focus on the technology, and it was really more of a focus on the impact that it's having and the ROI that it drives. So to answer your question, I think that, to me, I agree. Like every company now is, in some level or capacity, expected to have AI in some form. And I say so much so that from the investor lens, it's actually hard to understand what's real and what's not, and what's AI enabled versus AI native, and like where in the solution or in the tech stack is there real innovation. So, I think kind of to Colby's point, just throwing AI everywhere, to me, it's sort of like so much noise now that it really doesn't, it doesn't really elicit a net new response from me. And it's more so, what are the, sort of like small machinations that you're doing that actually make this technology different and, empower your customers, and sort of all the other things beyond, the natural expectation that in a world where tech is commoditized, there is an expectation that your tech stack will reflect the commoditization of that technology.
Yeah, and so who here has gotten their blood testing results recently and put them into ChatGPT or Claude? Or asked AI a health-related question? Okay, so we're all using AI for our health, right? Similarly, clinicians are doing the same. So all my friends who are doctors, from an ER doctor to a PCP to a surgeon, are using ChatGPT at the minimum to augment themselves as clinicians. I think it's definitely table stakes, as mentioned, and it's just the new normal. It's the new standard. But now, how do we take AI and actually implement it into clinical workflows at scale? That's a completely different question. How do we make that process safe? How do we protect patients' health records? All of that. At VO Health, I mean, for us, we're developing algorithmic biomarkers that stand for human functional capacity. For that, we need a lot of data, and we need to crunch a lot of data really, really well and draw insights from that data. So we've been using machine learning AI for a very long time to do that, and most companies in this space have. So it's really not about AI or not AI, eating digital health or not. It's really about how do we use better tools to do more stuff more efficiently at a lower cost structure so that we can develop more awesome stuff.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I think this is a great framing for the conversation. So, Katie, because you sit in a unique space kind of between a lot of different stakeholders in industry regarding digital health, how do you see kind of what excites you today? And then how do you see kind of the difference between maybe the hype and reality and where you think AI is really going to be transformative versus where there's a lot of noise?
I think, well, there are a lot of things that are exciting me right now. One that I would bring up here is just thinking about consumer or patient empowerment. These tools are in the hands of patients, and some patients and folks who have long asked for their information, this, that, they now have it. People are paying attention to their health on a continuous basis and not episodically, not when they're sick. I think these are really positive, encouraging trends that will actually shift the system. I think where then I get worried about the hype is shifting the burden of navigating care from the system to the patient feels totally irresponsible and like a real cheat. We need to actually fix the system. If you've ever been sick or been caring for someone who's sick, you're not like, oh God, I wish I were more empowered right now. You're like, oh my gosh, make this system work for me. Make the system better in my time of need. And so what I think we need to do in parallel is, yes, we know from our recent data that year over year, the amount of consumers using all kinds of chats and AI to understand their own health is doubling. It is happening. Consumers are moving faster than institutions, period. And we now need to invest in the infrastructure and the institutions that then support that and, meet them in the middle and not just shift the burden or the responsibility.
Right. And building on that, Moses, from an investor lens, because I mean, every investor in the room now is trying to, like you said, kind of figure out how AI relates to every company they're evaluating substantively, right? But it's happening so fast. I think also investors, and part of this article from Hallie Tecco is a founder lens on what founders were hoping investors would look at more in companies in this AI landscape. Like, how are you evaluating companies now, given the dynamics? Like, what do those internal discussions look like, and where do you see the differentiation versus how you would advise people to kind of escape some of the traps of just throwing AI around their deck and,
It's a good question. I would say that from my lens, it's sort of like a cascade, right? Because like investors have a responsibility to their LPs, LPs have a responsibility on capital deployment, and I think there are a lot of times where decisions that are made on what gets funded and how it gets funded is a reflection of these other dynamics that actually have not much to do with the company themselves. So I think for us, the focus has always been not to invest around sort of like the next hottest, sexiest thing that's kind of the flavor of the month. We look for embedded workflows. We look for things that are have like really high switching costs, so that once people kind of choose this technology, it's not something that they can just sort of like whip and replace, next month or when a new competitor shows up. We look for things that have, unique distribution layers, unique data sets, some form of proprietary ownership of that data. We look for things that are, catalyzing ROI, and that could be defined as to the customer, to the patient, to the physician. So, I think that there's there's like a many ways to sort of define like what makes a really interesting company in today's world, and everyone has their own theses that they invest behind of. But I'd say to founders, like identifying investors that sort of really believe in your mission and are really down for the long haul of what they're trying to do, as opposed to perhaps perhaps they're, like I said, different ways to invest. Like there are also the ways of we'll see this, but we need to get out in the next round, or we can only sort of think through 2 layers of capital infusion and then what's next. Finding people that are really invested in the long-term solution that you're trying to build, because it's not going to be a straight and linear path. And I think part of it is making sure that your technology is not just predicated on the hype of the technology, but that the adoption of the technology really drives like real value. I think fundamentally that's what healthcare is. We are not an industry, and I don't think it's provocative to say this, but we're not really an industry that's predicated on paying the hottest price for the most novel technology. It's really what's driving ROI for your customers that makes something sticky. So I think that stickiness is always sort of a core component of at least how I think about the world.
Yeah, let me ask a follow-on, Moses, to that. So another aspect of this that doesn't get talked about as much, I think, is that every company now is expected to do more with less because of AI. So it's not just how AI is embedded into their innovation to have more impact and ROI, but the other side of that equation is, how AI turbocharges an operation. And I know I've seen that, the expectations from investors in terms of, for example, annual recurring revenue per employee is shifting. So can you tell me that other side of the evaluation, like how you think about the operation itself? Are you scrutinizing the operation even more than before because of AI, or do you not think investors have maybe made that full shift yet?
I think it's likely a mix. I would say that I think there's certain functions within a business that for sure should be automated, right? I think like that's just table stakes in this day and age. But there are certain functions that, in my belief, absolutely should not be automated. And I think just for me, like the initial conversation with any founder is to just really get a sense of how do they think about the world, how do they think about their product, where do they believe it fits in, and sort of like what decisions are you really going to make with the capital that's infused into your business. So like if you're a novel startup seed business and you hire a former Cooley partner as your general counsel to help you review NDAs, that's likely not a great use of capital relative to AI tools that could very easily do the same thing. But if you're focused on a certain niche and your capital is being deployed to solve that niche, I think to me, understanding like where AI fits into the tech stack, at what time are you doing it? Is it more for the administrative layer, or if you're like a clinical facing company, are you using it for clinical things? Are you being responsible with how it's deployed? I think I don't really think about it from the concept of like ARR per employee. I think it's more so like, at least for me, my ARR metrics are more so by customer and like how much it costs you to land that customer, what does expanding with that customer looks like, what's the sales cycle that it takes for you to land that customer, how efficient are you in that process. So I would think about it more like that, but I think this also kind of goes back to the different flavors of investors, and I think investors who really understand healthcare know that like ARR per employee is likely not the most effective way to sort of evaluate a business would be my
So I would love to hear from our entrepreneurs about this, how you're thinking about AI in your operation.
I was just thinking about a Slack integration that I should probably do. Like as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, he's right. I should probably go and do that. As far as AI, I think I mentioned a little bit that we are using machine learning regularly as part of our biomarker development process. But for us, we think about AI, just operationally, like how to do more with less. As you say, we're also a pre-seed stage company, so we have to do the work of 100 people. 5 of us have to do the work of 100 people, and AI has been absolutely revolutionary. I've led marketing and growth for startups for 15 years, and I am in bliss every single day when I talk to Claude. So very, very happy about it. But yeah, maybe Golvias.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, obviously, both internally and externally, we're exploring how AI can support our community health workers in our business. Shout out to Aaron, one of our interns this summer from the school here at Public Health. He was on a call with our team the other day, and he mentioned he built some, a bot with Claude. And one of my coworkers said, "Who's Claude?" And, it was an interesting realization that we probably aren't incorporating AI enough internally to support our business. And I keep bringing it up with my co-founder, and since then we've launched an AI committee internally to rethink how we do it. We're going to do an AI hackathon internally later on this summer to rethink how we're incorporating AI. And it's certainly, thinking about externally, the business it's a big timing thing, right? It's easy for how many entrepreneurs in the room? How many founders? Okay, great. So everyone can have an idea, right? But getting the traction, getting the validation is another thing. Thinking about our customer being health plans and health systems as well as community health workers, it's a big timing thing, right? When are they ready for AI, and how do they see AI incorporate into their business model? And then, of course, when they're willing to pay for it, that's when you really know you have an idea. And so for us, thinking about how policy has opened up the door for reimbursement for community health workers, how telehealth has opened up the opportunity for virtual and phone-based outreach, it's been a big timing thing. And certainly now that we have the adoption, the traction, getting 50 health plans wasn't easy, but now that we have that, we can now innovate and externally explore how we can better use AI to increase margins, increase efficiency, increase outcomes. And so timing is a big thing. Getting the right people on board to support AI adoption is huge. And of course, once you have the infrastructure, the technology in place, you can do a lot of things with that.
That's great. So I want to switch gears. So Alina, I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing at VO Health. So, I was really excited when I met the team because, from a public health perspective, there's an increasing conversation about the role of biomarkers as a population health tool. And I know speaking with Alina and Brooks, their vision is really to democratize access to VO2 max data, right, which has become known as one of the stronger indicators now for health span, right? So tell us a little bit more about how you think about the vision of what you're building and how you think about this type of approach not just being for athletes or elite performers, but for the general population.
Yeah, definitely. So a biomarker in general, I think we've all heard the word. Many of you might have even gone to Function Health or Superpower and measured your complete blood panel recently. And a biomarker is just a biological signal, right? How many people here have a wearable or are wearing a wearable, right? So these are all creating, generating biomarkers or measuring different functions of your body. But our thesis at VO Health is that not all of these biomarkers are necessarily all that useful. So the healthcare system that we're in is unfortunately a reactive healthcare system. So we go to the doctor and we're measuring lagging indicators of disease, right? So your hemoglobin A1C is elevated. That means that for at least 3 months, something's been going on in the wrong direction, right? Your fasting glucose maybe is a little off, et cetera. But we don't really have any true measures of health. So how do we know that we're healthy? And so thus far, it's been absence of disease. But that's not really the best and most useful measurement to be able to prevent disease and to be able to optimize our function. So my co-founder for a couple of years worked at the NIH Metabolic Research Unit. He was part of the Biggest Loser study and did a lot of really cool stuff during his PhD. And mitochondrial metabolism, all sorts of cool stuff. And he was doing VO2 max testing. He was doing MRIs, DEXA scans, clamps to measure metabolic health, and all these upstream, really intense functional assessments that really get to the root of what someone's function is in real time. And unfortunately, that toolkit is not available to the general public. It is available to, the Brian Johnsons of the world and the Peter Attias of the world and their clients. It's also available to elite athletes. But up until now, it hasn't been available to the rest of us. And so we do have some cool estimates of VO2 max from our smartwatches. We do have, access to some other types of estimates. But what we wanted to do is to take all of that functional data from gold standard assessments and turn them into scalable tools that anybody can use through a simple blood draw. And we chose blood draws, and you might say, why a blood test? Why not another wearable or something like that? Well, blood tests influence about 70% of all medical decisions. So for us, we don't want to just be another, health tech, consumer health company fad. We want functional assessments that are upstream of long-term disease that are really predictive of long-term healthcare outcomes to be embedded in the healthcare system. So we kind of have to meet the system where it's at. Right now, we're really lucky to be riding this, longevity train, right? The word longevity has come up more in the last couple of years than ever in human history. And that's a good thing because now people actually care and have a little bit more awareness about it. But I'll pause there.
No, that's great. And Katie, how do you see it from a kind of broader lens of this consumer health, kind of direct to consumer, but also kind of wellness and biomarker space and how it fits into this scene?
I think one of the things that it brings up for me, especially in our role at Rock Health, there's sort of two things. One, I just want to build off one of Colby's earlier points and your earlier points. AI is making it easier to be an entrepreneur. That's good. Rock Health was founded 15 years ago to give oxygen to new folks trying to get into this space. So you can fail faster. You can try. There's a bunch you can do before you even need to raise $1. But then raising $1, we know that VC is like less than 5% of business innovation funding and fails 90% of the time. And this is where I think when I look at what you're building, and I hope you are VC backed and scaling and all the things, and also from our Q1 investment trends data, 60% of digital health funding went to 12 companies. So yes, we are having a lot of innovation, but we are having massive concentration, which restricts this notion that now anybody can be an entrepreneur, And so I think we have to think really differently, and I'm really paying attention to entrepreneurs that are diversifying their funding and their income streams and their revenue streams, because I do think there is a huge role for venture philanthropy to play. Obviously, we see PE playing a huge role for the public sector to play. I think we need to get much more creative with the financing of these innovations so that they actually reach the public, so that whatever you're investing or building is not just reaching a few people. And also, it's great if it's reaching a few people. Let's make it better and then figure out true innovation actually reaches more people better and doesn't just actually stay in that concentrated place of just reaching the few folks you named. And I'm really excited about that because we are seeing new kinds of capital come into the space and entrepreneurs like both of you who are entertaining different kinds of capital really beautifully to get to the thing you're building and to deliver better with those different sources of funding. So.
Yeah, and so to that report, just to give the data on this, so in their report, Q1 of 2026, the average deal size for digital health was 60 million. Average for 2025 deal size, 29.5 million. Think about it, that's crazy, right? So there's that concentration. So then also what's in this report is that the length of time for seed to Series A and the data they're tracking is increasing. So for our founders that are trying to build early, you really have to think carefully about runway. As founders, we're all optimistic. We're going to hit all those milestones and raise in 12 months, 18 months. But the truth is, you're going to have to stretch potentially 50 to 100% longer in terms of time with your resources. And AI can be a tool for that. But this is all in the new data. So it's important for us to be paying attention. And that consolidation is real and kind of boxing out some of our early stage innovators. Colby, to you, I think, and I've known Colby for a while as well as Katie, and I've been really honestly proud of you as a public health person, because who builds a venture-backed community health worker platform? I've never heard of this, right? I'm familiar with community health workers in the African context, where I did global health, and we've been using community health workers at Last Mile for decades. And for Colby to say, look, we can bring a model like that, this last mile that's community first, and also build a sustainable business model around that. This is no easy feat. So I'm really proud to see what you've been doing because you've stuck at this a long time. So tell us more about how. We have a lot of mission-driven entrepreneurs here. How were you able to build that type of narrative and validation to be a venture-backed company and supporting community health workers at scale?
Yeah. Who's public health in here? Anyone from the public health? Okay. So we're great at giving free stuff out, right? Free, vaccinations, free condoms, whatever you want, it's free, right? Free services. We don't like to charge for anything. And that's one of the challenges, I think, when I see public health programs just focus on, the services, the good, the impact, but not the business model, right? The financing is so huge. especially in this day and age with policy and with healthcare and Medicaid, Medicare. I mean, so many different business models in healthcare. I think understanding the policy and the financing models and economics of healthcare is so key. When I got into this work, we actually adopted quite a bit our company. We actually started off as a services company. So we had our small team of community health workers during the pandemic doing outreach and engagement, and we were on spreadsheets, but realized that everyone else around us was also on spreadsheets. And that kind of lit the fire to say, like, hey, clearly technology is a gap here. Right? No one's going to jump onto Epic or use these, complicated systems for, community health outreach. I mean, it just wasn't a thing. So we started off doing, technology, but we then realized that technology isn't enough. We couldn't just give people technology and all of a sudden community health workers are empowered. We had to actually provide them services and background and assistance and onboarding support and doing their claims and credentialing and contracting and all these different things that are a big factor. So we actually expanded our business. We started a managed services organization like an MSO. We started providing them services, and then we saw a little tick in our revenue. Later, we realized that claims is actually the most important thing. Getting paid was the most important thing. So we actually, once we unlocked a billing system in our platform, our spike again rose up, and that's when we raised our seed and our Series A. Certainly adapting along the way, but staying grounded in who we're there to serve. Understanding our workforce, understanding who really needs this work and the pain points. The health plans also adapted, what they are asking for along the way. At first, they just said, hey, we'll pay you to onboard community health workers and doulas, get them contracted. And that was like the minimum requirement. And then they said, wait, actually, it's not just enough to contract with them. Help them get better claims, cleaner claims. We don't want to see denials. So all of a sudden, we were then expected to help them and assist them with compliance and credentialing and claims and making sure they met the compliance requirements for health plans. Now they're asking us to actually do more, right? Quality initiatives, campaigns, re-engagement, redetermination. And so it's pretty interesting to see, how you can listen to your customers, both the community health workers and the health plans who are paying for the software, and then adapting along the way. And that's kind of how we landed where we are today. So we have now a provider network that supports community health workers, about 3,000 across the country, helping them bill and contract with health plans and getting paid. And it's all built on our infrastructure. We actually don't sell our software anymore. It's really, they're not asking us for software, they're asking us to get paid. And so the value prop we present to them is very different. We don't try to do demos anymore. I actually close more deals now without demos than with demos because they don't care about our technology. That's just how you do the work. Kind of like Uber, right? Uber doesn't sell you technology. As a driver, drivers want to get paid and be a worker and make a living. So I think reframing how you think about your business, even when technology is key to how you grow, is key in this day and age.
This is great. Can you explain the model? I think it'd be really interesting and how you've kind of navigated the reimbursement pathways. Just break down the model for us.
Yeah, so for the longest time, community health workers couldn't get contracted, right? There's no credentialing pathway for a community health worker, unlike a nurse or a doctor or NP. So for community health workers, every state has a different policy regarding how they can get credentialed and contracted. We had to understand that policy, which is where the public health came in. Right? We have to understand how they can get paid, and we have to understand how we can overcome those barriers with either NPs, with the provider group, with the right billing tools, trying to help them understand the policy. NPI, MRN, all these different, CIN, these acronyms they don't understand. So how do we overcome those barriers and help them get supercharged to then do work for the health plans? And so we actually do all that infrastructure, that back-end support, basically building provider group for community health workers. If you know like Nourished or Growth Therapy and all these other companies doing it in different spaces, we're essentially that for community health workers.
Amazing. And Moses, over to you, just kind of thinking about kind of investor trends. What excites you now? Like, what are the types of deals you're looking at where you feel like, at least in this moment where there is a lot of rapid change, there's also tremendous opportunity? Like, what type of deals are exciting you now?
So I would say we spend a lot of our time trying to sift through the noise has actually been really difficult, if I'm being very honest. So I'd say for us, I've been less focused on the buzzword AI fundraisers. So you won't really see us invest alongside the massive rounds that get announced and are getting all the headline. We don't really invest behind that. We would focus more on things that we think have really unique value propositions, are probably much harder to build, require longer term capital to get there. And that could flow either from, going early. So like our average check size is around the $20 to $30 million range, but we also will go as early as incubation or pre-seed or seed, because if the opportunity is there. And I think one of my favorite things about working at Deerfield is the flexibility of that capital. And I think in this day and age, you kind of have to be flexible with your capital deployment strategy in order to really win. So for me, like rural health is a untapped chassis for growth and potential. There are many ways to play it. There are many things to, you can think about as to like, where is innovation there? But like, that's a category that's very interesting to me. I'm very interested in mental health and like, what does that look like in terms of enabling individuals beyond, so one of the growing things that actually I spend a lot of time thinking about is there hasn't really been a profitable virtual care model that's worked. We've gotten a lot of them that scaled, but like getting them to profitability has always been a challenge, to the point where I think now you're seeing investor sentiment sort of sour on these virtual care delivery platforms because there hasn't really been a model you can really point to that says this model really works. And for us, that's exciting. Like, it's not that clearly there's a demand for virtual care, and people would rather take care of themselves without having to travel to see their PCP or whatever. So I think for us, finding those gaps in care where there might be headline innovation, but like what's the real problem underneath it? Where are people not investing, and what do people consider maybe too hard to do? For us, that's more the initial filter. And then sort of aligning with first principles on those problems makes it easier to then sort of identify, where might we be able to play? What are the opportunities there? And then going from there. But I think for me, it's, rural is exciting. Mental health and behavioral is exciting. Aging in place technology is exciting. All things for like senior living, and so there's so many ways to kind of think through where innovation exists. But I think for us, just the ability to be flexible. Either this is a skilled company, it's about to go public, we're the last capital in, and we can do that, or like this is a very novel concept, hasn't really been tried before, we could also do that. To me, I think the flexibility of that model is more exciting to me because it really just allows you to kind of play wherever the market's going.
Very interesting. I'm about to go off script here. Y'all ready? There's a thread I want to pick up from something Katie mentioned earlier, and it's a conversation I have with entrepreneurs a lot, and it's something I'm teaching in my class, which is to be venture-backed or not. And I think this is like an elephant in the room, I think, in our space for many reasons. I think one, to what Katie mentioned earlier, the nature of the investment trends is such that to be an early stage innovator going for venture capital is very difficult. It was always difficult, and actually in this moment it's a little bit harder, right? But I think also my observation when I talk to innovators, and I've been through this myself, is that we may not have thought as deeply as we should have about whether or not what we're pursuing should be a venture-backed company or not. If so, do we understand clearly what the criteria are to be a venture-backed company and what they're looking for? And if not, do we have a clear pathway to revenue and sustainability with some other model of financing? And I think Katie's right. Like, a lot of us are talking about the nature of healthcare requiring. There are so many good businesses in healthcare. Honestly, there are many millionaires in healthcare that never raised any venture capital. They just built businesses. They figured out a problem. They started making a little bit of revenue. They found a way to get a couple loans to make some strategic investments. They kept making money. The next thing you know, you've never heard of these companies, by the way, right? But they're in the ecosystem. So I want to kind of open that up for the panel before we go to our final question, which is, first, for our entrepreneurs, how do you think about like being venture backed or not, like, and what the conversations have looked like? And I'm sure, Colby, there's a lot there. And then I want to hear from you as well, from Katie and Moses.
We are a venture-backed startup. We raised last September our initial round. We decided to go that route because we needed a significant amount of startup capital in order to fund our team and to fund our technology. So if we didn't need that startup capital, we have a laboratory here, by the way, in New Haven at Biolabs. And so in order for us to have, and we're a CLIA lab now, so we got our CLIA certificate, our CLIA license a few months ago in record time. But in order to do these kinds of really hard things, they are capital intensive. So if we didn't need the capital, we would not have raised venture capital. But we did need the capital. And I will say our VCs that are on our team are really awesome. So 2048 Ventures, Better Ventures, Ensemble Boost are some of them, and just a really supportive team of folks that are incredibly helpful to us. And so what I tell other entrepreneurs is, go with folks that are really going to give you an edge at the beginning, right? So these are strategic investors that are extremely helpful. We talk to them very regularly, and we love working with them. So we made that choice, but I think that you're diluting your company early on from the start. So and it's an extra level of sort of like oversight and pressure. And so if that's not where you want to go, then don't go. If you don't need to go there, don't go there. But it's been a really positive experience for us thus far.
Yeah, we actually didn't raise our first round until about a year and a half, 2 years into it. And at that time, we already had 10 or so employees, and that's because we had a lot of money from other sources. So we raised, we had some money from foundations. We actually got some grants to get started. We got some ARPA funds during the pandemic to get started. I actually missed the days when we were really small and got to experiment and try things out and screw up and figure things out along the way. But now we have 50 employees, and it's like, y'all are expensive because people cost money. Engineers are a lot of money. Seeing the money go out the door every month is a painful thing. I have to say. But yeah, we had to raise some money to grow our impact. I think, like you mentioned, like who you have around the table is really important. Like I mentioned earlier, we have about a third of our investors are impact investors, groups like American Heart Association, SCAN Foundation, California Healthcare Foundation. So I think they bring a really unique insight around, working with the Medicaid population, working with community health workers from nonprofits, and understanding that space. And we also have healthcare investors like Rock Health, Flare Capital. So they bring the perspective of how do we get bigger deals with health plans, and how do we align our interests with the health systems and CMOs, and how do they think. And then we have a third of our investors are SaaS investors. So keeping us grounded on our numbers, understanding what margins are all about, how do we grow our SaaS revenue and grow at scale. So I think who you have around the table is really important, like mentioned, and understanding that if this is a right path for you or not. So thanks.
So I have a lot of strong opinions on this, actually. So I think that I think that there's this like common, I don't even know what to call it, but like I think one of the common mistakes that happens within this ecosystem is that there's confirmation bias on the definition of success. And I think traditional funds sort of, all anchor on everyone wants to be the one that backs the unicorn. And I think because of that, kind of to your earlier point on the concentration of capital, to me, that's a element of that confirmation bias in real time. And I think a lot of companies and a lot of entrepreneurs would be much better off if they sort of, listen to what you're saying, which is perhaps there are other means of funding and other means of capital that are better aligned with your definition of success. Not every company is meant to be $1 billion company, and that's okay. Like, it's a $3 million check that returns you 30 is a great outcome. But like, I feel like we've anchored on this, like, it has to be these mega rounds. I have to be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. I have to be, the $1 billion outcome. And I think it's sort of like creates this pervasive incentive that incentivizes founders to like chase the sexy problems as opposed to chasing problems that you're perhaps better off solving, or maybe just, actually needs to be solved. So to me, I don't think every company should be a venture-backed company. I think, a lot of founders take dilution, in my view, just for dilution's sake, and I don't really fully understand that. Like, if your investors aren't able to drive more value to you beyond just capital, like, you can get capital literally anywhere. So like, who's actually driving value to you? Who's able to unlock your customers? Who's able to, get you preferential pricing, or at least help you anchor? I think early stage founders, the biggest gap is information. Like, you don't really know how to price yourself. You don't know how long it should take you to land. Like, there's just so many gaps that, having investors that can help you solve those problems, to me, is way more valuable than just someone throwing you a $10 million check and saying, check in with us in 6 months and let's see where the progress has gone. So anyway, I can ramble on that for a minute. But,
mean, it is pretty unique. You said earlier you're able to be flexible with your capital. There are others who have that too, to be sure. But that flexibility is, I think, unique and super valuable. We see a lot of entrepreneurs pretzel themselves to fit the money rather than the money fitting the idea. And we have been pushing for a long time of just like widening the aperture on how we think about the funding. I do not fault entrepreneurs for seeking venture dollars. You used the word hype earlier. It's in the business model to be hyped. It's in the business model to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Those investors are loud and proud. That is part of the model, and so you know who they are. And all the other kinds of capital is really hard to find because they're like quiet, it's anonymous, it's over here. They have these rules for this one high net worth individual, and this family office operates this way differently, and only if you get this intro through the one like it's hard to navigate other types of funding, whereas VC is like, we're here, like, you know, we're going to brag about how much money we have, which is awesome. So I don't fault those entrepreneurs, but I wish the rest of the capital stack was far easier to navigate. And I think we're about to see a huge shift in philanthropy. If OpenAI has a $200 billion foundation soon, I'm hopeful that some of that money can support some of these ideas either in their earlier stages or like maybe never to be a business, but to like mission accomplish and on to the next thing to solve. And so I'm hopeful about that. I've been frustrated by traditional philanthropy, who I don't feel like has met this. Surely they've been busy with like really urgent, like all kinds of catastrophic things happening right now, but also where they're showing up in this AI space. I just cannot wait for more money to flow to, like, Colby, when I hear you talking about like, okay, we've got the AI committee, I'm like, someone should like fund that to support you doing that. Like these shifts are happening so fast. So anyway, I spend a lot of time talking to philanthropists. They're curious about what to do with their money. I'm really excited for them to do something with it. There's some great examples of it already, again, to be sure, but I am hopeful in this sort of next wave of philanthropy that perhaps we will see some more transformation, some bigger giving, some bolder bets in healthcare.
No, I mean, so many good points. And one thing that's kind of builds on this, is not discussed so much in this context, is the generational wealth transfer that's about to happen in the US. So the context of that, though, is that we spend a lot of time talking about, the Bill Gates of the world and that generation of philanthropy, but there's a whole nother phase of money that's about to unlock with people that are like us and care about these things and want to fund things differently. This is kind of what Katie's getting at. And I think right now they're not as visible, but I think that generational wealth transfer is also going to play part in defining and building some of these new models with different ways to deploy capital. Because like we're all invested in this. Like if we don't solve these things, whether it's our kids, and further generations, it's all going to break. So I mean, everyone knows. And so I think I'm hopeful in that way. So final question, just to be brief, and then I know there'll be some questions in the room. Like looking forward, if we look to 2030, what's something that you think is niche now, but that you think is going to get more traction or be more pervasive in either how we do health innovation or the way we're solving problems? So I'll just go down the line.
Per usual, I have many answers, but the one I'll use is just something that hasn't come up yet, which is, you touched on it earlier. We worked with the American Association of Family Physicians. We surveyed folks who are serving patients. 80% of them are using AI already. The majority of them want to be using it more. They're excited about it. They want more training on it. And so when I look ahead to 2030, we, in some of our innovation circles, we go, oh God, doctors are so difficult. Well, the other thing they told us is they'd like to be included in those innovation cycles, and how might we do that better? And so I'm excited for some changes that actually include the folks that serve patients in those innovation cycles. They're asking for it. They have great ideas. And don't tell them it'll make them more efficient. They're not in charge of their time to begin with. But I do think it will get at some of the burnout. I do think it will make them feel like they're able to focus on the reason they got into medicine, nursing, et cetera, to begin with. And so I'd love to see us partnering more intentionally and thoughtfully, because the demand is there, and I think that will create some system transformation. I don't think 2030 is too far away for a lot of that.
For me, I'd say by 2030, the nursing home capacity in the United States would be fully saturated. And I think one of the consequences of that is just the enablement of aging in place, aging at home. And what does that look like over time? I think something that's super niche right now is, pulling out your phone and asking ChatGPT a quick health question. But you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what does that look like at scale? And, how are your PCPs or your providers connected with these tools to help you get more direct and couture information for those moments where you're seeking advice, but you don't want to go straight to your provider. I think the macro tailwinds are pushing us in that direction, which I think will enable a lot of transformative technology, but it has to be done responsibly.
From our perspective, 10 years ago, only the most wealthy individuals among us can go and get a full body, a full week of specialized assessments for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, more people in not just the 1%, but maybe the top 10%, top 15% can get that. And I think that in just a couple of years, almost all of us can get that and can get a pretty good baseline of where we are. And today we might call it biohacking, which is just a rebrand of maybe what we've been doing for thousands of years since the beginning of time anyway, which is human optimization. So I think all of us will have the toolkit to be able to do that. If you think about trends like GLP-1s, right? And the use of GLP-1s and how quickly that scaled, that is human optimization as well at a population level. So I think that with what we're building, as an example, easy turnkey blood tests of functional capacity assessments, and more innovations in data science, AI, wearables, and so forth, we're going to be able to actually take health into our own hands, and hopefully the healthcare system will help support us by covering that, but insurance covering that, and so on, and really making it truly accessible to all of us.
I remember when we first started, the bad word in our, ecosystem was integrate. Everyone wants to integrate with everything. Can you integrate with Epic? Can you integrate with this? Can you integrate with that? And it freaked us out because we couldn't integrate with anything, right, at the time. But I think, thinking to the future, I think the integration of data, the integration of systems, being able to, have the continuity of care for patients, including community health workers, is huge for us. I think that's what we're excited about. Now we can integrate with, EHRs, HIEs, wearables. That's kind of the future, I think. And incorporating and bringing community health workers along with us is what we see as really, really valuable. We are supporting some work right now with Meta on the Meta glasses. How can all these tools and resources support community health workers and empower them rather than replace them? So we're excited about
That's
the data.
amazing. I'm mindful of time. Maybe there's 2 questions, but you'll be able to find our friends here to talk to them.
Hi, Summer Peace, first year at Yale School of Public Health. So I'm really interested for the founders. A big piece that's missing from the conversation around AI expansion is often the ethical one about how it's, using up a lot of water, electricity, polluting the environment, etc. So to what extent do you guys consider or balance the ethical concerns, and to what extent should future innovators also be thinking about that?
Yeah, it's obviously really important.
You can Rochambeau.
I know. I think what's exciting, we actually recently started a community health worker council, and we have some doulas on there, and they keep us really true, right? They check us on everything. We run some ideas by them, and I think that community engagement both helps our business, but also keeps our internal teams focused on what's important. I think there's a lot of I can think of 5 companies that try to build AI to replace community health workers, and they're no longer existent. Right? They've shut down since then. So I think being mindful of what we do and the timing and how we do it is really key, especially with AI.
I think for us, the way that we've been thinking about it is more so from a patient safety perspective. We are currently running an IRB-approved NCT registered research trial. We're consented up and down. We have a laboratory that's a CLIA laboratory, so any data that we take in has to be, it's highly regulated. So we think about the inputs very, very carefully. And I think it's a really good question. I think that when you're a VC-backed startup, we have to move really, really fast. And, often you move fast and break things, and that's probably what's happening. So it's something that we're trying to be as mindful of as possible. But when it comes to the sustainability implications, I used to work in vertical farming for many years as an example. And so, I'm very familiar with with the implications of all of that. But it's really not something that comes up in conversation with most founders, most circles that we're in. So it's a really good question that you raise.
Great. I appreciate all the conversation. I just would love to kind of probe maybe like an undercurrent that I kind of felt in the conversation, which is today we're sitting at Yale, premier research institution. We got a beautiful academic medical center down the street. We're talking about cutting edge things in technology and healthcare. And I'm kind of internally squaring that with yesterday. I was up in Saranac Lake, way upstate New York, rural health setting, meeting with the CEO of Adirondack Health, talking about kind of the milieu in which they practice medicine, deliver care, all the constraints they have, the reimbursement landscape they have, the needs they have, and I guess I think there are many ways to influence healthcare. Obviously, policy, capital, voice, but technology being a major one. And I would say this kind of momentum building in technology has been a rising tide in general, but also I think has deepened distinct microcosms of healthcare delivery and infrastructure in our country. And I think it kind of mirrors maybe the state of trust, or should I say distrust in the legacy systems. And so I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you reconcile technology so that we're kind of, dare I say, flattening the curve rather than worsening the divide.
Just a small question to end with. I have a one-word answer. No, I don't. I don't have a tight answer for you. But what I will say is, this is where earlier, what's the role of philanthropy to play? We are going to leave people in any innovation cycle if we are not paying attention, if we're not intentional, if we're not funding the ecosystem actors, the things that aren't always as tangible looking. We will leave things behind. We fight like heck every day at Rock Health to try not to do that as technology is moving at a breakneck speed. But who is supporting that? I'm encouraged by things like the Rural Health Transformation Funding that you have to have A as a part of it. I'm encouraged by what Duke was doing and is doing with the Health AI partnership to support rural hospitals and fund and provide free technical assistance. It's not quite enough. But I think we have to pay attention to how we make sure all this innovation actually reaches more people better. It's actually possible with the innovation because you're talking about very precise problems. Technology can be precise. Technology can meet people where it's at, but there's a bridge that's needed. And who's funding and building and enabling those bridges? And we often ignore them or underfund them or take them for granted. And whether that's some public infrastructure, an entity like Rock Health, some of the work you all are doing, there are bridges and we need to build new ones. And I mean that metaphorically, but also you can start to see it when it works well. And so I'm interested in more of that, and I'm interested in folks who want to fund more of that and actually support those leaders. It goes back to that intentionality of how we build this infrastructure right now.
Here. So I echo that. Your question made, so my college best friend is a ER doc at a safety net hospital. And it's always fascinating to me to sort of compare and contrast the innovation that to me feels as if it's widely adopted, like ambient scribing to me is overly saturated, everyone has it. And then you talk to someone who works in probably where having that tool is most consequential and they don't have it. So it's comparing that in my mind is an example of what you're saying, but I do think it just comes down to finding alternative sources of capital, places that, either if it's philanthropic or otherwise, but just places that are willing to give a voice to those who actually need it and just kind of bring that to the top of the crop so that people know that there's a real problem, there's real access issues. And while we may all focus on technology that's deployed within our direct ecosystem, since it impacts us most directly, there is that second layer, third layer, particularly in the rural health setting, that's not getting the attention it needs and the attention it deserves. How to surface that, to me, it's going to take collaboration, it's going to take loud voices, and it's going to take a lot of pounding of the table. But I do believe that this current moment in history with technology as democratized as it is probably the most enabled and empowered anyone might be to be able to solve these issues.
Well, let's give the panel a hand.